This podcast is for informational purposes only and is not intended as tax, accounting, financial, or legal advice. Okay, let's go. When it comes to aging and caregiving, clarity ahead of time can make all the difference. In this series, Building Your Team, we'll introduce professionals who play key roles with aging in place, from legal to medical to just practical support. Today, we start with occupational therapy. Please enjoy this episode with Dr. Brandy Archie. Welcome, everybody, to another episode of the Sandwich Bread Podcast. Very special episode today. I'm joined by Dr. Brandy Archie. How are you, Brandy?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, we're old pals. I did her podcast. Now she's suffering through 20 minutes with me.
We are sharing. We're
sharing. We're growing. I love it. All right, so I'm going to give a little bit of background on Dr. Brandy. Dr. Brandy Archie is an occupational therapist who is certified in living in place, which is particularly relevant to a couple of conversations we'll have with her. She's also the founder of Ask Samie, which I'm excited to spend a little bit of time on this podcast diving into that. But it's a really cool digital platform, making daily living safer, easier, and more affordable for older adults and people with disabilities. Really interesting, and I want to dive into that a little bit. But at a high level, 17 years of experience in home health and elder-focused care, and she built Ask Samie to kind of bridge one of the needs she identified in that space. So, and then last but not least, she is a graduate of the finest university in the Midwest, maybe the world. I was
going to say, why are you limiting us to the Midwest? I mean, it is definitely a fine university. Go Jays.
Go Jays.
We're both alums of Creighton University.
That's right. And even more special, Dr. Brandy played basketball at Creighton, which is my favorite sport. I was not good enough to play basketball for Creighton University. Barely good enough to play in high school a little bit, but...
Go Lady Jays, yes.
But the Lady Jays, who I also follow religiously, along with the men's team, very exciting when I learned that nugget about you.
So I'm loving this era.
Yes, and father to two little girls. I was a big fan before their arrivals, but it hits home extra hard, and I watch women's sports extra closely. And tonight, I will be coaching a bunch of 6-year-old girls in basketball.
Yeah,
it's more like chaos.
Exercising and herding cats, but try to get a few fundamentals in there. And that's as much as you can do with 6-year-olds.
We're starting a little bit of a series here with you. You're the first to go for this. We're going to call this Building Your Team, and it's going to be a little mini-series within the Sandwich Bread Pod universe where we're going to take a few minutes to define and dig into specific experts that are really critical to the elder care universe, and that includes financial planning, estate planning, elder law. Like there's a whole range, tax, and this little niche we're going into now is more related to occupational therapies. This is going to be called the Building Your Team Occupational Therapist Edition, and we're going to spend 15 minutes now getting into occupational therapy. What is it? Why is it important? Things to look for, little tips and takeaways for a listener to do a great job going through the process of finding the right care for their aging parent or elder.
Yeah.
So high level, Dr. Brandy, what is occupational therapy and why is it important for aging in place?
Occupational therapy, our goal is to help you live life. So whether that's a little kid who needs to learn how to sit still and have what they need at school to learn, or an older adult whose body functions differently than it used to, but still needs to be able to get dressed and feed themselves and go play bridge with their friends. We work across the lifespan in whatever goals make sense for that person. And so because that definition is so broad, it's often really hard to understand, like, what is OT? But really, our goal is to help you be as safe and as independent as possible, doing whatever it is that you want to do in your life. So as a person who might be a caregiver, you might have OT just as a support to be like, how do I manage all of these different components in my life? And then on the flip side, an OT might work with your parent in order to figure out, how are we going to make sure you're taking your meds on time, cooking yourself something to eat, even though your standing ability is not as good as it used to be, and like finding ways to accommodate your life to make it work for your current status in what things are going on with your mind and body. So as a member of the team in an aging in place context, because your question was, why are we important for aging in place? This is like the gist of it, actually. I think that if you have a parent that you're trying to help stay living at home, you should get an OT evaluation, because our goal is to really help observe the medical and the cognitive and the physical environment and manipulate all of that so that it works better. So if getting up and down the stairs is hard and getting out of the bed is a challenge and they're not hanging out with friends as much as they used to, we're going to get to the bottom of the causes for that and either try to rehabilitate the body or accommodate with something, some kind of change or doing something in a different way.
Awesome. Okay, so my first kind of takeaway from that is, and I feel like this is going back to my CFP training, the definition of occupational therapy always kind of branded in my brain as working like rehabilitation toward an occupation, a specific occupation like a job. And myth number one is no, it's really any occupation, and that occupation could be just living, being retired.
Yes, yes. The definition of occupation, while we have wedged it into work, it's actually what you spend your time doing. That's what that word occupation means. And so whatever you're trying to spend your time doing, occupational therapists help you get to doing that.
Got it. And you said a second thing kind of toward the end there about getting an OT evaluation. So for aging individuals, it could be for their own home, they could be moving into a new home. Talk us through the evaluation experience, what that means specifically, and looks like in practice for an aging individual. Like most people are like looking at their home and going, I think it's probably fine. What are those little triggers to say it's not fine or let's make sure it's fine? And then where do you go from there?
Okay, I'm going to take an expansive view of this and talk about it from how you might have experienced OT in the past and then how you could be experiencing OT in other ways. So it's very often that you run into occupational therapists when there's acute change in function. So let's say your parent got total hip replacement, right? We're preparing for this surgery. We know we're going to have precautions after we get done with surgery and not be able to do things in the way that we used to, at least for some time, 3 or 6 months, right?
Yeah.
You'd see an occupational therapist in the hospital. They're going to help them immediately figure out how to get dressed and how to get up and how to take a shower, and they're going to be training you on that. And then you're going to come home, and then you're going to have therapists come to the house to help do those things in that context. Like, how can I translate that to home? And then you might even have it in outpatient because we're able to get out of the house now. And I might go to an OT to help me figure out how I'm going to get back to golfing or back to getting in and out of the church or whatever it is the things you need to do. So you could definitely use OT in an acute situation, which the trigger is, because you asked me about triggers, a change in physical or cognitive status. And so if you go through the medical system, they're going to kind of push you that way. But the thing is that I think people don't recognize, you could notice a trigger and it might not have a medical event. So let's say mom had a fall. Maybe you did go to the ER, but nothing's broken. We got some ibuprofen and we're going home. Okay, she still had a fall and we still had some trouble. Now what?
Yeah.
Well, that's a great time to have an OT eval because we can get to the root of like what's causing the falls and therefore what should we change and make it better to do, even though we didn't end up in the hospital and in rehab and on that whole pathway that I explained at first. And so what an OT would do in that situation is come into the home and assess like what are the things that mom likes to, needs to, and wants to do? What are the barriers to doing that? So what's our physical condition? What's our cognitive condition? What's the physical area looking like? And then, taking all that information, come up with some solutions. So maybe we're weaker than we should be, and we can do some exercises to strengthen. Always a good idea, right? And so we're going to improve the body as much as we can. But sometimes we can't improve the body. The body is going to continue to get worse, maybe because we have a progressive disease. And so what can we change in the home in order to create a more safe environment? Maybe the fall happened because we're getting up at night to go to the bathroom frequently and we don't have enough lighting and she happened to trip over the dog's toy. It's not always there, but it was that time. And so what can we do to prevent that in the future? So then we might recommend some automatic night lights or something like that. And so this is all very dependent on the person and where they live and who they are. And so I can always give examples, but it's always going to be a little bit different depending on who it is and what the goals are.
Got it.
But does that give like a good overview of like how you might expect to see us work?
Yeah. And those situations or examples seem to be more reactive or sort of responding to a change. Does it make sense to do proactive OT evaluations if you reach certain age milestones? Is there a recommendation there?
Yeah. I think as soon as somebody has decided, you know what? I really want to do everything I can to stay living in this house. That's a great trigger point for OT because maybe we want to prevent that fall from happening in the first place.
Yes.
And we want to take our time to make some modifications to the home in order to make it look beautiful and also be functional for you. And so as soon as somebody's decided that, like, maybe we should just see if there's anything we can be doing better, even if something bad hasn't happened. And OT eval is a great way to go about that.
Yeah, that's an interesting point you bring up. I feel like if your kids are the ones outfitting your home, they're going to focus on your health and well-being. And if you're proactive, you can actually make it aesthetically nice too. You can have it designed to your liking.
Yeah.
Because your kids are going to come in and be like, I don't want my parents to fall down. They don't want to get the color scheme just right, or those other variables. So you can control
when
it.
you have time to plan, yes, you can take the time to look for the right thing and order the thing instead of getting what's right off the shelf and at your local, hardware store, and you can get it to match your needs. And I would argue to say, as a person who might be caring for a parent, you really should consider the aesthetics. I have worked with not just one, but many, many people who have chosen to put themselves more at risk because they didn't like the aesthetics or how that looked or felt to them in their home, which is their home, right? And that even though they knew the risks and benefits, they decided, for example, putting something on top of a toilet to make it higher so it's easier to get up and down. This person only had one bathroom and was like, I don't want my grandkids to have to get on enough of that. I don't want my guests to see that, so I'm not going to do that. And I'm like, you're the one that lives here. And you have to do the toilet every day, multiple times a day, and they might come over once a month or a week. And so I do think it's really important as people who might be suggesting things to other people to do in their own homes to try to meet their needs, like not just their physical needs, but also their emotional needs.
That's great. Okay, cool. And I have a question about where we find occupational therapists for these types of evaluations. We'll get to that at the end, connected to the Ask Samie platform, but in general, I want your advice on that. And then who isn't a fit for occupational therapy? This might be kind of an easy one, but I want to kind of flip that question on.
It's maybe an easy one because I'm going to say there's nobody who's not a fit. Because everybody can benefit, I think, at any stage. But as long as you're open to some new suggestions about ways to make life easier, then it's a good fit.
Great. All right, we'll jump into finding the right occupational therapist for you. You mentioned OT evaluations. I'm curious, if there are solutions out there to find somebody to do a proactive or reactive OT evaluation in your home. But just at a higher level, if you need an occupational therapist, what are some certifications or things to look for as a novice individual heading out into the world to try to find an occupational therapist? A lot of people probably start with Google or go to your primary care physician and try to get a referral. But what can help somebody kind of cut through all the noise and find the right OT for your needs?
I think that it really depends on the situation. So I'm going to try to make this as clear and easy as possible. Yeah. Occupational therapy is a covered service under your medical insurance. And so with a physician's order, and in some places you don't even need that to get started, you can see an occupational therapist and have it covered by your medical insurance. And so that first place that I would probably start is with your primary care person, especially if there's already a active thing happening. We're having a decline in our memory, or a change in our balance, or something medically is happening to our bodies or minds. Get an order from your physician and see a therapist. But to focus on like the older adult population, if you want to be proactive and maybe we haven't gone to the hospital to initiate this, you are looking for somebody who can come to the home. And so you either want to access your home health benefit or find an occupational therapist that comes to the home under the outpatient Medicare Part B benefit. I'm trying to be really direct. So the first access point is through insurance, and the easiest place to start is with your doctor and let them help you figure out the ways to go about it. However, if there's not a medical change, or you're looking for an OT to do something specifically, like I want to consider remodeling this house, I'm not really having any real problems right now that are medical in nature, but I do want an expert on the case, then you're looking for an OT that specializes in aging in place or living in place. So you asked about certifications. Those are called CAPS, C-A-P-S, and CLIPP, C-L-I-P-P. And those OTs often work in private pay models. So you don't need to go get a doctor's order. You're going to pay them for their service to come help you figure out what you need at home and consult with you about what you need. So either can work for you, and the goal is to get to one. And I would also argue that every occupational therapist has the baseline skills to be able to be helpful in an aging in place situation, even if they don't have a certification. But the ones who are certified are focused on that specifically. And so they're going to be very highly qualified to give you the resources that you need.
Great. Yeah, my feeling is that a lot of the work occupational therapists do is probably related to aging, at least a decent chunk of your typical occupational therapist. I'm sure there are folks that specialize and say, really, I want to allocate my time to this other type of occupational therapy. But I would assume it's, especially with an aging boomer population, there's a huge demand for that specific kind of aging component to it. And that's the same way with financial planning. There's the CFP certification, which is like the big one, and then there are sub-certifications that live below that. I don't tell people to just rely on that. It's bonus points, but it helps on the journey to finding the right person.
Exactly. Totally agree with that.
Great. Yeah, we'll link in the show notes to those specific certifications so folks can kind of add that to their checklist as like bonus points as they're evaluating. But I think you did a really nice job covering the spectrum of clinical need to just like an in-home consultation. So let's segue to Ask Samie for the closing minutes of this show, because it ties in really nicely to the question of like, how do we source and find occupational therapists for this type of need? Tell us a little bit about the platform and the problem it's looking to solve for.
Yeah. So Ask Samie is a online marketplace that gives you access to occupational therapy insights to help you with aging in place or anything related to being at home and being functional. So you can literally go to asksamie.com and type in the chat and ask Samie a helpful question. So like, I'm struggling to help my mom get her meds regularly and she has dementia. What can I do? And what it'll provide you is what we would have come up with as an OT, as far as the equipment that they might need or a service they might need and a resource that you could use. And so in order to do that, we're pulling everything in one spot. So the equipment is there, the resources are there, and also occupational therapists are there. So if your question feels more specific and you would like some help from an occupational therapist, we have a whole nationwide network of them there, and you can message us and ask us for help with that. So what you'll see today is there's a handful listed, but we have like 450 OTs in the background that are not formally in front yet as we continue to build out our network. So Cool. If you're looking for somebody in your area, you just message us and let us know. And then there's also the ability to get a virtual assessment as well, if you would prefer to have it that way. We are your major resource nationwide for the tools and the service providers that you need in order to help make living at home easier.
I love it. You're at like the forefront of a huge, huge need in the coming decades. So a lot of opportunity to help folks out there. So it's exciting. Well, this is great,
super glad
Brandy.
To do it.
Thanks so much. This has been perfect. This has been our first ever edition of the Building Your Team segment within the Sandwich Bread podcast. And I really appreciate you taking the time to lend your expertise and help us understand the occupational therapy field and how we should think about applying it to our unique situations and adding the right occupational therapist to our team. So thank you so much. Go Jays.
Thanks for having me. Go Jays.
All right. Have a good day. Sandwich Bread Pod is hosted by me, Tom Kaminsky. Huge thank you to Lauren Nose, our executive producer, for making this show happen, and to Andrew Maxon of Celebrator Creative Studios for branding and design. And lastly, to Audionautics for our theme music. Are you someone in the sandwich generation? We'd love to hear from you. Share with us your story, and maybe we'll find a way to work you into our podcast, or simply reference the materials and the experiences you've had. We value that very much. Reach out to us at sandwichbreadpod@twinrobins.com or hello@twinrobins.com. TWINROBINS.com. Thanks so much again for listening. The information discussed in this podcast is only for general explanations and education. It is not specific tax, legal, or investment advice. Before acting on anything you heard here, first consult with your tax, legal, or investment advisor. Past performance of any investment discussed on this show does not guarantee future results. Twin Robins Capital LLC is a registered investment advisor offering advisory services in the states of Missouri, Georgia, Indiana, Virginia, and in all other jurisdictions where exempted. Registration does not imply a certain level of skill or training.
This is a Twin Robins production.